that he frankly thinks he won the election. But he also added this part. Take a listen.
For the good of this nation, this is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay?
Okay, so he says he'd like all voting to stop except the voting in Arizona, which he'd like to continue to see if he closes the gap. We've called Arizona, as we mentioned, for Joe Biden. Shannon Bream, he says he wants to go directly to the Supreme Court. That's not how this works.
I mean, if we think back to Gore v. Bush, Bush v. Gore, however you want to title that, 20 years ago, you have to have a live controversy. You've got to challenge something in a state. It ended up being Florida in that case. There were a number of state court decisions, federal court decisions.
You mean
in
you
Florida.
start in a state to
Right.
bubble up, yeah.
You've got to have something going on there to say, hey, there's a problem with the way they're counting in Florida or Pennsylvania or somewhere else. Attach yourself to that controversy and push that to the court. Now, there have been a ton of things that have gone to the Supreme Court in the last few weeks about curbside voting, witness, requirements, all kinds of things, signatures, mail-in ballots. A lot of those, there was an injunction given or the court said we're not going to get involved with this. Most of them were not decided on the merits. So there may be a number of state decisions, especially Pennsylvania, that the Trump team and the Trump campaign is looking at to say, which ones of these can we now, if we're not already involved, get involved with these and push them up to the high court?
But in the middle of an election, can they circumvent at least a couple of steps from the state not going through the different districts to go right to the Supreme Court?
You can expedite, but you're going to have to start somewhere at that state or the federal level within that state, a federal court within Florida or Pennsylvania, or challenge the state court in one of those places. You can't just show up at the Supreme Court tomorrow and say, we want to stop 10 states that are counting. You've got to attach to some kind of live controversy. So I got to think they have been watching these cases very closely. They've been involved in some of them directly, others they have not. But they're going to have to try to get involved with one of those in particular or more, multiple. They may flood on different states to go up to the court and say, we need something expedited.
I just want to say one thing. There's a difference between voting and counting. And what the president clearly said was that he wanted the voting to stop.
Those are different.
It is now officially after Election Day. So everyone should have voted already. Things that are in the mail, that's a different situation. The counting continues, and I don't think that he said anything to contradict that. But he said that he believes that the voting should stop. We are past the point where you can vote.
Except that then he said, I don't want to see them find 10,000 votes in some place.
Precisely, which would be to allow the voting to continue.
But that's the counting.
But he may be,
there's a difference.
Right, the semantics may be an issue for him here because specifically in Pennsylvania, we talk about this fact that the Supreme Court has noticed that the Secretary of State there has asked them to segregate votes that came in after 8 p.m. on voting day, Tuesday, now into Wednesday, through Friday. So he may be saying, I don't think you should get to continue to vote. But again, we're talking about counting.
But the Supreme Court already made a decision on that one.
Well, not on the merits.
No, but
not on the merits. They said we're not going to get involved with it. But the close of the decision, that was a comment on this by Justice Alito. He says nothing in the court's order today precludes petitioner from applying to this court for relief about those segregated votes. So he was pushing that door open, saying we're not deciding anything on the merits, but you can come back. And we may still now rule on the merits of those 3 extra days of votes.
But in no place can you vote. You can't now fill out your ballot and submit it. It has to be postmarked, and I know obviously we've talked about what the Pennsylvania situation is with the court decision, that if the postmark is fuzzy, they're going to assume it was in there. But the bottom line is that no one can vote anymore. Your vote has to have been in the ballot. It can be in the circulation. It could be sitting in the post office. The fact is that you have, in some cases, as long as 10 days in North Carolina for that vote to make its way to the processing. But you cannot vote after November 3rd.
No, I agree, but I think what he's suggesting is that Pennsylvania Democrats will suddenly find votes. Not that people are going to, the Democrats certainly wouldn't say, no, we want to keep voting, but that he's saying that they're going to manufacture votes and they want to stop that process, which in effect means stop the counting of votes at a certain point.
Well, if you're manufacturing them, then you're checking boxes after the vote is over in order to make up the difference.
Well, that's what he's going to claim.
Right, that's voting.
Well, and you have to remember, in some of these lower court decisions, there were courts that decided, and there were several that came in around the same time, Michigan and Wisconsin and others, there were courts that said, we're going to presume, even if there's no postmark on it or we can't read it, that it was postmarked and sent in by the approved day, by election day.
Pennsylvania.
So there are those who are going to worry, listen, if there's not even going to be a clear mandate on evidence of a postmark, then people, quote unquote, they're going to make allegations that they're finding votes and putting them into the mix. If we're going to say some of these can count without a clear postmark, we're going to presume that they were in
I'm
on
going to
time.
keep coming back to this. A lot of these states had a ton of ballots that were requested, and they only had so many that they got back. And the difference is hundreds of thousands that have yet to come back. Now, they could have been postmarked prior to November 3rd.
Which would make them fine.
The vote would have happened,
Yeah.
but they're not
Or
back.
the person could have said, I got an absentee ballot, but I'm not confident in it, so instead I'm going to go vote in person. Right? So I think there's
That's very
that
possible,
issue.
but
Yeah.
it's hundreds of thousands. So
Right.
the difference is, it could make a difference in a lot of these states. So that is where we bring in Arnon Mishkin,
Mm-hmm.
director of the Fox News Decision Desk, and I hope you have something to tell us. Good morning.
I don't have much more to tell you than you already know. There are these states that are outstanding. Right now, Biden clearly has a lead in Nevada. There is some data that suggests we're close to a call there. We're sort of waiting for additional vote from Las Vegas and Reno. There's been a heavy turnout or heavy vote return from outstate, the other parts of Nevada, the rural parts of Nevada, which made the race a little tighter. But right now, the former vice president appears to be in the lead, but it's not quite at the callable stages. In the South, the two must-win states of North Carolina and Georgia, the president is doing quite well there. But at the same time, there's some evidence that some of the urban areas, some of the suburban Atlanta areas have not yet reported. They've stopped counting in Georgia. They've stopped counting in North Carolina. In both cases, while the president has a clear lead, there's some evidence to suggest that the outstanding vote sort of skews Biden, and that's why we haven't been able to make a call. There's also some evidence that we're not going to be able to make a call in either one of those states until either very late tonight or tomorrow, because some of the places have stopped counting. Then there remains the Maine 2, where the president is in the lead, the second CD of Maine, which is one electoral vote. That's a vote he won last time by about 10 points. He's up about 3 or 5 points right now in Maine 2, and there's a clear chance that he could win that. I'd call that sort of also knowable but not callable. So we're not prepared to call it, but he clearly has a lead. And then the big mystery are the 3 Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. We were
Okay,
told.
let's just talk
Yeah.
to Pennsylvania first of all.
Sure.
600,000 difference, and the president pointed to that. And it's 70, what is it, 75% in? Something to that effect?
Roughly. That's
Roughly.
based on an estimate of what the total vote was today. Which is
76% of the precincts in, total, or percentage of the precincts in. 600,000, that's a big spread.
That is a huge spread. Here's the real weird thing that's gone on today. Okay, Democrats have voted early or by mail. Republicans have voted in person on election day, and the skew is huge. If you know, national numbers from our Fox News voter analysis says that roughly that Biden won the early and election day, early and mail-in vote by 25 points, and that Trump won the election day vote by 25 points. And this is true across the nation. I mean, even a state like Alabama, which was clearly a red state, Mississippi, clearly a red state, we knew the president was going to win. If you just looked at the early and early and mail-in vote, Biden was ahead in those counts. And similarly, in all these 3 Rust Belt states, but including in Pennsylvania, when you see such a strong lead for the president, it's not an indication necessarily that he's going to win this state.
So wait,
It's
does
an indication-
Pennsylvania count their absentee and mail-in vote later?
Yes. The way
Okay.
Pennsylvania does, they don't start counting or processing the absentee and mail-in vote until election day. In many of these southern states, they started processing them several days ago.
So they
Hence,
can make up 600,000?
it is theoretically possible, yes, because there's such a huge skew. It is theoretically possible, depending on how much vote is out there, and that's why we're not yet comfortable saying that the president would win Pennsylvania, and why we think we just have to wait and see. I think that, you guys are a lot better at judging what the courts are going to say about which of these votes can count. But under the existing rules of Pennsylvania and under the law, the court decisions that have happened in the past few days prior to the election, the ballots that have arrived or that will arrive in a few days, if they're postmarked, are valid ballots and should be counted.
So in Pennsylvania, you also have 7 counties, I believe, that said that they wouldn't be able to begin counting the mail-in ballots until today, right? That
Yes.
they were going to do all of the all of the election day of ballots first. Do you see? Are those the counties where we're seeing?
Those are yes. That's why we're not calling this fairly large Trump lead for the president, because we think the reason it's such a large lead is because we haven't gotten the results from that mail-in. Those mail-in ballots and the early voting, and that's the stuff that we think is where Biden is going to do well. And so, if the courts have said those votes will count, we have to take them into account when we make our call.
All right, let's turn to Michigan.
Was worried.
You were worried about Michigan?
No, that you would.
That we're going to keep going and keep you here all morning?
It's okay.
We are. Michigan. Now, this is, again, a pretty big spread, 73% in. What's happening there?
Michigan is another state where we're waiting on the election, the early and mail-in vote. We believe it skews heavily. The entire team is